Greetings, everyone. This is a special edition of Content Evolution's nuWorld, a regular call that we have at the intersection of people and technology. This one is focused specifically on a design effort and imagining what Content Evolution itself could do as a federation to use generative AI tools, kind of sparked by the announcement of ChatGPT at the end of November last year. Lots of buzz, lots of interest. So we thought that we would focus on what could we do as members and in turn offer in terms of speed or capabilities to our our various clients and the people that we choose to serve around the world. Before we dive into that, and we are going to spend the first part of this before Kyle Shannon joins us to think about use cases, and then we're going to go into active work. I want to introduce Mike McGuire. As you might remember, Willie Yam, former executive from Lenovo, was my co-host on the nuWorld calls, and now Mike is joining us. He has an extensive tech background in terms of observing and reporting on it. I'm going to let him, talk about that, but he also understands the people side. So he's a great fit for our conversations. Mike, welcome to nuWorld, and thanks for being on the board of advisors of Content Evolution. You're on mute.
As usual, step behind. Thank you very much, Kevin. Much appreciated. And I'm really pleased and flattered that Kevin invited me to join this August group. He did a very nice introduction of me. I did get into technology relatively early, kind of backed into it. I started out as a daily journalist, newspaper reporter here in the Bay Area. Got one of those great, very useful journalism degrees from San Jose State, and was working, pretty much while I was still in school as a reporter. And I fell into technology. Certain people on this phone have probably heard this story before, probably too many times. I was at that last generation of journalists who went from typewriters to computer terminals. It was in my junior year of college where I got conditioned about being an editor on the daily newspaper at San Jose State to have in my backpack a very special case to carry, if you recall, those 5-inch floppy disks that you used to have to work on some of those old newspaper terminals. It was a very important responsibility that many of us took mostly seriously. And then that but we were still using typewriters for the most part. There weren't a lot of terminals. And then when I got working in a daily newspaper, there were no typewriters. It was the first generation of completely, not quite digital, but computer-based newsrooms. And worked along there. I got very proficient with a product called the TRS-80, the Trash 80 from Radio Shack. That was the first portable I used to file stories late at night and from the road. With the fabulous acoustic couplers, if anybody remembers those, that you used to have to balance on the top of a payphone, hit the buttons at the same time, and hopefully your story got through. In about the third year of that, I was there in an afternoon, and the city editor said, "Hey, McGuire, you got to go down and got to go to this company down in Cupertino, and Mark's not here." This my colleague who generally covered kind of business. Nobody had technology reporters with the exception of a few, and that turned out to be Apple. And I walked into the room, and there was John Markoff at the time. I think he was at InfoWorld before he hit the newspaper biz. Elaine Richardson, myself, and some skinny guy in a white business shirt with a bow tie with the sleeves of his shirt rolled up, who basically, when I walked in the room, said, "Who the hell are you?" And I didn't know anything. I said, "Well, I'm Mike McGuire with the Fremont Argus. Who the hell are you?" And it was Steve Jobs. And that was what he pulled out of the bag was the Macintosh. And not having any background in computer technology, that's when I started learning about it. And I always approached it from, I needed to know enough about it. I didn't know how to design a chip or write software. I just need to know enough about it to how it practically works. And then what always interested me, much more interested than the technology itself, was how were people going to use it? As a reporter, it was awesome. You could back up and you could erase and delete. It was terrific. And that kind of just progressed. And then I wasn't really a tech reporter, but because I could make a trash 80 work and I had done that first story on the Mac, I got a few of those stories. And then a few years, about 3 or 4 years later, I left to become a writer for a company called Octel. I started with the Mac and then went downhill to voicemail systems. And from there, I worked at a number of basically more mobile companies, Acer, who was doing their first laptops, Grid Systems, which developed a lot of expensive and very unique laptops, and ultimately a company called GeoWorks that did the OS for the one of the first PDAs got to market before the Newton, was the Casio Zoomer. Long time. So I've got a lot of scars with mobile computing in my back, but in all of that, what was much more interesting, and even when I started working as an analyst at a company called DataQuest that Gartner later bought, is understanding how users, whether they were business users or consumers, were utilizing technology. And from there, I kind of went full circle with Steve Jobs. In 2006, I was working on 2000 to 2006, I was working a lot of media stuff that was how media, music, content, et cetera, was being affected by digital distribution. And then got the call to come down and see this thing that nobody would say what it was. Later turned out it was the iPhone. And then seeing, which was cool, what was really cool is hearing and seeing the vision about what they were going to put around it, the stores, the services, et cetera. And that's where I've been the last few years. Before I left Gartner, I was focused a lot on digital marketing and mobile marketing. And here again, we can talk about capacity of these systems, but it's always, to me, is how is this affecting the marketer's job and the target, how the consumer is reacting to these technologies and tools. And I'll say I'm kind of disappointed with where we've gone with a lot of quote digital marketing, unquote. It's really kind of devolved down to, or as a friend of mine that Kevin knows, Jake Serofman, described it best, orchestrated pestering is kind of where we are right now, in my opinion, with digital marketing. Kevin, I think that's long enough. I will stop if anybody has questions on my checkered past.
Well, a long history. I'll date myself by saying, when I went to school, it was all Selectric typewriters. I didn't put my hands on anything electronic until a little bit later. I did during summer, right? I had an internship at IBM in corporate advertising, so I got to play with that tech a little bit. But my homework in college was on punch cards on a Xerox computer, right? So that's really old. So with that said, we're delighted to have you as part of this. Let's turn to the conversation at hand. I'm looking at all the people who have joined us. One of note who is working with me, with Kyle Shannon, on a workshop that we deliver to clients called Unstoppable Forces is Richard Boyd. Richard, we're delighted to have you with us, and not too far away, right? Doesn't make any difference whether you're at home or in the office. You're not too far away now. So glad to have you with us. Do you have any opening thoughts about the current state of generative AI and related technologies that are on the minds and lips of people?
Yeah, a lot of people have reached out to me and my team over the last 2 months around this subject, and some of the criticisms have been getting a bit shrill. It's like, why are you being so quiet, Richard? It's like, hey, I'm processing, right? I'm still really, anytime there's like a big nodal point or a big transformation like this, I usually talk to a lot of people like those of you on this list that I've been talking to a lot while I'm processing it before I start really talking openly about it, because I think those of us who've been working with this technology for 14 years, which we have a different perspective. And, you know, we have to reboot our brains just like everyone else has had to. But our reboot is mostly around how jaundiced we've become around the technology, thinking like there's no way this stuff is going to be as useful as everybody expects anytime soon, because we're in the trenches working with it every day, and we're watching a lot of implementation failures and not enough training data and the semantic problems that I don't know, Kevin, if you've been tracking the PCI conversation around this with David Bray and Vince Cerf and all those folks. I finally sort of weighed in sort of with a toe today before I go in really deep. But, you know, I think, you know, listening to all the chatter around it, of course, I believe most people are reacting wrongly. You know, New York banning it is not the right thing to do. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. We know that about technology. But also, I think some of the application areas for this are just now really coming to light, because it's not just about prediction. It's not just about automating tasks. I think we actually have a great opportunity to affect the future, not just predict it, not just model it like we've done with other simulation technologies, but actually create a new future. So that is really promising. It also scares the hell out of me, right? Because if we have the wrong forces working with this tech, we're going to get a future none of us wants. Just like somewhat like what's happened with, I think David Weinberger wasn't he part of the PCI conversation? Was I might have been talking to him on a separate.
I think that it would have been separate. He hasn't been in our thread recently.
You know, we've been talking about how, you know, the great promise of the internet was that everyone would become a publisher. We would really democratize the commerce of ideas. And, you know, and then we got social media, and we used all this amazing technology not to cure cancer and populate the stars and save the planet, but to monetize human attention like we did over the previous decades, and with a lot of negative implications. So anyway, so I'm looking forward to the conversation. The general guidance I have for anybody looking to employ or deploy machine learning capabilities is, you know, it's not like other tech you've bought before. I've spent a lot of time, you know, well, you can't see the stuff behind me because I have my filter up, but you know, people who buy, especially in government, who buy enterprise applications and think this is just another enterprise application, have really got it wrong, and they need to be sort of slapped and woken up and shaken and told that this is really intimate, powerful technology. You've got to think about it differently. You want it under your control. You want to know how it was trained. It needs to be transparent to inquiry. And you need to be careful how you deploy it, and how you maintain it and monitor it. So anyway, that's just a bit of the guidance that you'll end up hearing from me.
Yeah, Richard is also a major advocate of reminding people that you know, all of the things that you see that are very, very interesting, you know, technology demonstrations are done with general population or generally available information that's in the semantic web. But, you know, if you start to put your proprietary information out there, right, you're putting yourself at risk. So there are, you know, there's a lot, you know, to be considered in terms of what you share in terms of, because it's a training data set that's going to be available in perpetuity outside the boundaries of your company.
The other opportunity there, though, is that by augmenting the public data set with your specific data set and inside your company, if done thoughtfully and carefully, it can unlock powers that we've only dreamed of before. So there's that, I think, is the real opportunity to counter the threat or the danger. But
so we have people, we have people who are not Content Evolution members, but are nuWorld members that are observing our conversation today. I just want to make sure that, you know, as we get into, you know, actual creation mode, you're welcome to comment. The design here is to, make the Content Evolution Federation itself more purposeful and powerful. And as a glass bowl, fish bowl, we're glad to have you watching, listening, commenting, and adding value. Now, what we've talked about in background with Kyle, and I've had a little bit of conversation with Mike too, is what could we potentially, use this to do? And the first is, if our website, the Content Evolution website, were reimagined, an earlier version of the website had a lot of active links in it that we were finding difficulty maintaining because the links were breaking, and we went to listing member companies but not actively linking to their websites. We're about to redo that because generative AI gives us a different opportunity. If you can come in and scan the entire website, everything that it says, and also move across the hyperlinks and say, so what is this website linked to, and read all of those sites, you can do a Mission Impossible kind of thematic, which is client wants to do XYZ. Who can help? Well, it would pull, based on what given the fact that you could generate a good creative brief at the front end, or the person inquiring, if we had a public version of this, and it would automatically give you a perspective of, okay, for this particular assignment, you need these 3 firms or these 5 firms, all right, as collaborators to satisfy these clients' needs. We need, we need research, we need a strategy point of view, we need a new writer for positioning, and we need it seems like they're asking and inquiring about audio branding, so we need Audio Arbini in here to talk about what Audio Brain could bring to the table, as an example. So that's one level, right, just to kind of get you primed. We could potentially take the Content Evolution ECA, or expert collaboration approach format, and also start to think about, well, if that was the case, could we also automatically, do a draft of a proposal based on, that creative brief? So that's a starting point. Mike, what do you want to throw in before we open it up for discussion?
Well, I think, one of the areas I'd looked at in the last few years at Gartner was how marketing and AI and machine learning were going to be applied to some of these marketing systems and practices. And what was, kind of the usual things were there. How do I save cost? How do I reduce duplication? How do I do personalization? How do I become more personal? And it's very interesting when we would see the other side of that with consumers, when we would survey them about that, where, consumers, we did a fairly big survey in China and the US. And it was very interesting. US consumers were mostly concerned about how a brand's use of AI would benefit them. And it wasn't actually about personalization, and having a much better customer experience and feeling some of those soft attributes. It was about, what's the literal financial benefit to me? Or how do I get products other people don't get? How do I get the new cool stuff? Chinese consumers in China were not, there was, as you might expect, much more, and by the way, US consumers were very suspicious of AI when in the hands of, it's typical US consumers. Less concerned about brands having these tools and this data and information, very worried about the government having it. And Chinese consumers were much more open to the use of AI by the government, as long as it benefited everybody, right? And so we're seeing these kind of different things kind of move along. And I think generative AI, to me, is one of those issues where, again, brands will be leading. Richard maybe can't talk about a lot of the stuff in the past he's done, but obviously some of these simulations and tools are going to be applicable to the government entities. But I think, what I see happening is consumers perhaps being accepting. And I think one of the things is I don't know that they're going to be playing the old Who song or that chorus of "Won't Get Fooled Again." I think many consumers probably don't care, right? As long as they're feeling that they are benefiting personally. And I think, some of the highfalutin ideas I've heard from marketing teams about how to use this technology, I think get into the area of not actually being that interesting or useful to consumers. So I think this early time where we see, some of the technologies that the companies are using, I think we can be suspicious and keep an eye on things like ChatGPT and its desire to break up a certain reporter's marriage. But I think when we think about generative, if I'm able to generate things as a consumer using a tool that's built in there and create even better slideshows than Ken Burns' effect in iTunes or iMovie, it's going to be great. And I think likewise they'll be perfectly satisfied with some of the entertainment content that comes through. Sorry if I went too long there, Kevin.
That's all right.
Some initial thoughts.
Good. Mike, Mike Wing, have you on camera. Where is your current thinking? You were introduced to this topic a while back. Where's your?
Well, I profess absolutely zero real knowledge about it. I have a question. And this is maybe too narrow, but anyway, what we've been using for the last, I don't know, decade or more, 15 years, something, are algorithmic systems that are optimized for observing behavior, right? Whether it's the Google search engine that looks where people go and sends you those links near the top of the list, or whether it's, some version of, what Facebook does, saying, if you like this, you may like that, or Amazon doing that. And that's observing where people go on the web. And as I take it, and I would really be eager for enlightenment and correction on this, but as I understand it, the generative AI is basically just using large language models to keep predicting what the next best word in an answer in a sentence will be, at least in the chat function. And I haven't thought through what the implications of that are. Obviously we've all seen these articles, we've seen the tsunami of things that are being published now about it, including what you referenced, Mike, of Kevin Roos's, of the Bing chat function becoming increasingly combative. It's like, instead of, open the pod door, Hal, I'm sorry, I can't do that, Dave. It's open the pod door, Hal, eat shit and die, Dave. So there's that, the thing, but I don't know how interesting or relevant these particular initial, first contact experiences are or something, but I guess I would wonder if there are, and what they might be, implications of moving from behavior observation to language prediction as the kind of core model.
I think that we're clearly going to be, at least initially, using this as something that is clearly curated. Nothing would land in the hands of a client without us looking at it first, at least in a content evolution,
Sure. For us, I'm sorry, yeah. I was making a more just.
I know that. I'm just saying that, for the purposes of the focus of this call is, maybe responding to someone with a question or a request for, assistance could, be responded to in an hour as opposed to a day or a week, right? We could,
triaging, right?
Yeah, well, create a more responsive and adaptive, right, federation response, right, to inquiries, right, which could spread the word, word of mouth to others. Well, I called them and, they had something for me within, a couple of hours. It was kind of a remarkable response time, so that kind of drives the backyard barbecue, kind of conversation. In any event, that's speed is one, drafts are another. Yes, Mike.
This is something for maybe for Kyle or Richard, some of the more folks technically versed in this. Is the note, can these engines can absorb this in real time as opposed to being trained on it, then getting in a real-time exchange? Could I, for example, could we be having a meeting like this meeting, have it recorded, and have the engine be listening in on the conversation and then summation, right? It spit back, guys, this is what you talked about in the directions you went with for the client, the response to the client that you wanted. I just don't know the real time, how.
Yeah, theoretically, yes. But you would have to, define that with the current tool set that you are willing to share that conversation with the outside world to get that summary, right? Richard, you just came back on camera. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think what we're seeing is if you have enough computational power available to you and you have a deeply trained system, you can actually have real-time responses. When I first started playing with Chat GPT back in December, we thought like, okay, they're mechanically turking this, right? Because why is there such a leap between 2 and 3 or BERT and the other systems that we've used before? But the real-time response, the speed of the responses indicated that no, that's machine speed that's happening. Even though some of the responses back then still weren't that satisfying until you get really adept at prompts, right? But there's no reason why it couldn't be real-time. Obviously, it's easier and less expensive if you can sort of send the job to a compute server and have it compute it at the lowest cost point in time. I mean, that we'll end up having conversations like that, because every time you do a prompt, as you guys probably know, it's 5 to 10 cents of cost that is paid by somebody. But yeah, I don't think there's any reason why it shouldn't be able to do real time. How satisfying will it be? I don't know. I think if you give it more time and more computational power, it'll be more satisfying.
I mean, anything like this that you turn on where you say, oh, give me a closed caption, translation, you can pull that and give it to the device, either real time, right? Link it, or, cut and paste it and ask for that summary afterwards. Mike, you were about to jump in.
Me?
Well,
we're gonna have to. I was, but we're gonna have to come up with a naming convention. But my question there is, Richard, do we think in that kind of real time, back in that real time context question, are cues going to be useful to an engine like this? Like Kevin, we both share the same affliction, I think. Computer, as they did on on Star Trek, that kind of cue that would prompt the engine to, this is now, I will summarize the last X or give us X, computer do Y. Is that too much old school thinking, or is that not even particularly useful? I just was curious. Being able to,
I think,
yeah, I mean, to get into that context that we're talking about, how would we use it? Again, if we're working with a client, things like being able to say, have a brainstorming session, have that recorded, have the thing spit back, the engine result. Here are the top 3 recommendations or the next action. And what I'm wondering is, are there ways to cue the device, to signal to it, or to the engine rather, this is what I want you to do right now in real time? And again, I don't need to bring in Star Trek.
So it depends on whether you want it to be visible or invisible to the client, right, during that session. Richard, you were about to comment, and then I'm going to ask some other folks to jump in about what they would like to seek. What are the things we would imagine without constraint that content evolution would want to be able to do, or rather than digging just into the technical capabilities. I'd like us to explore what we think we would like to be able to do as a federation.
Well, just the one comment that I'll make is that the only consideration ultimately, when you really go through the whole logical process of thinking about what's possible is, the only constraint, the real constraint that we know of is the speed of light in terms of real time, right? So I talked about years ago how when we started creating high frequency trading systems, it wasn't enough to have your own AI running on your own computer, processing trade information. You actually had to be have your machine be as physically close as possible to the other trading machines. So if it's in New York, you've got to be right down there on Wall Street. You can't be in Yonkers,
right?
Because machines work at the speed of light. So it's literally fractions of a second. And we actually caught the systems trading with each other in the future. I'll just let you parse that for a second. I mean, that's the constraint. So really it starts, you have to give the parameters of, here's what I want it to do, here's my budget for it. So it's okay to, I'd rather spend a little bit less money and get the answer a little bit later and let it process, or maybe go through a couple of processes, or I want the rough draft right now and I'm willing to spend more money for it. Those are the new kinds of considerations.
Okay. Outstanding. So Kyle Shannon has joined us. He's getting a briefing from Mike by cell phone on what's taken place so far, and then he'll jump on and be with us. Mac Turner, you've been listening. What's occurring to you as a former senior executive, all right, that had a lot of data at his fingertips, but not necessarily organized in the way that we're discussing? What are the implications, you think?
Well, and I agree with Mike's comments relative to the de-evolution of so much of digital marketing. And I do think that there are opportunities to resurrect what it potentially could be within that space, and kind of move away from what more and more data scientists that I talk to are just describing as we have just shifted back to data processing. The other thing that I'm interested in is strategic alternative evaluation. So if we are working with a client that has different strategic needs, there is a tendency to use the hammer that we have to solve the problem, as opposed to evaluating, then this goes back to our conversation on different types of logic, but here's a vector of potential strategic choices. Let's use what we know about the potential outcomes of those choices and make a set of recommendations or trade-offs that we and the client could then walk through in terms of the feasibility of the implementation. I see my camera is messing up, so I'm going to go dark for a second and I'll be right back.
Okay, Mac, thanks. Technology is providing an interesting, view of you. Peter Van, I see that you're joining us from our across the pond, our EU friend. Glad to have you watching, observing, listening. What have you been doing in this space? We're about to go into our brainstorming mode. We welcome your thoughts.
Thank you. I'm just in the call since 5 minutes, so I haven't followed the part. Yeah. But to your point, what have I been doing in this space? I'm using AI a lot for suggesting artistic imagery, and also I've tried ChatGPT to come up with a manifesto for a project that I'm working on, which is across it's an artistic undertaking, trying to build a new city. And I asked ChatGPT, what would be the manifesto about this city?
Okay.
So
well, that's great. That prompts me to say that one of the things that we could, do more easily than we could in the past is when we respond to clients, we can put in a lot more visualization, right, than just words into proposals and, you know, into our expert collaboration approaches. And that would make them stickier and come alive. Kyle, we're delighted to have you with us. We've had an interesting, you know, discussion. I think you got a backgrounder from Mike.
I did.
So we are primed and ready. We've talked about, you know, how content evolution itself could become more knowable to people.
Yep.
We've talked about proposals, we've talked about speed, and we were just talking about adding visualization to responses to clients, you know, that could be potentially powerful rather than, you know, words and pictures as opposed to just words. So
Yep.
Delighted to have you with us. And the workshop part begins now with you being with us.
Great. Hey, everybody. Thank you for your time. Thank you also for your indulgence. I'm sorry I was late. I had a last minute, very important client opportunity came up. I just presented, she was the first one I presented a new vision of an AI amplified vision of Storyvine to, and she actually got very excited about it, that's the best possible outcome. So thanks for indulging me in being late. Here's what I'd like to do for the workshop. As we were talking about what this workshop could be, Kevin came up with the idea of, you know, one of the things that we've worked to do within content evolution is if a request comes in from a client about, hey, I need to solve this kind of problem, how do we make it really easy to figure out, okay, which members of content evolution might be able to deliver that, right? So how do we, as quickly as possible, get to that answer? And what I figured I would do is I'll show you some of the tools for how I would attack that. And then what I want to encourage you to do is follow along, like open these tools up, some of them, and we can sort of play together here. And I'll just show you kind of how I'm attacking, sort of breaking the problem down into little bits. And Richard, this is probably going to be very remedial for you, but I think there's a lot of what you do could serve as a foundation for how we actually generate a searchable data set, you know, that we can put some of what I'm thinking about on top of. So I would love your input as well. So with that, let me just jump in and show you a couple of the things that that I want to play with. Okay, can you see my screen?
We can.
All right. So, and the other thing I'd like to do. So for everyone on the call, can I just get a sense of how many people are on the call right now?
20.
Okay.
You.
I would love to just get a sense really quickly. Have you used ChatGPT or OpenAI? And sort of where are we on the call in terms of who's used what tools? I would love to just get just a quick round the horn. Where are you with using any of these AI tools?
So I just put my thumb up. If you guys want to use the reactions thing to give Kyle a visual sense of where you are, that would be a good way to do it.
All right, so about a third maybe have used it. So give me a thumbs down if you have not used any of these tools.
Let me just see here.
I got no thumbs down. No one's admitting it.
No, I never saw a thumbs down. That's interesting. Where's the thumbs down?
Thumbs down? All right. Well, give me a thumbs up if you have not used any of these tools. Oh, there's John Rubin gave me a thumbs down. Okay, good.
He found the icon.
He found the icon.
Yeah, the standard menu is
Rebecca
applause.
gave us a tier. Rebecca, what is that? Are you?
That was, well, I gave you first the open mouth. And like, no, I haven't tried it yet. And then I was trying to do the thumbs down, and now you can see why I'm probably not the candidate to be the first in line to use these things.
Perfect. Great. So here's what I'd like you to do. I would like you, so I'm gonna walk you through a couple of tools that I'm using.
Yeah.
I would like everyone on the call to at least pretend to open up ChatGPT. So go to chat.openai.com. And if you don't have an account, sign up for an account, get it up and running. So that's one of the tools that we'll look at. One of the other tools that we're going to look at is OpenAI's Playground. This is basically the back-end engine that sits underneath ChatGPT. I find this a little bit easier to work in because it gives you, it's got more, switches and dials that you can control things with. I'm also using the Bing development browser that has GPT built into it. So you'll see you can see my screen, right? You see this right-hand column. This right-hand column is actually a ChatGPT window. There's a column to compose content. There's a column for insights, which reads the content of the window to the left. I'm probably not going to use much of the Bing stuff because of the New York Times article where Bing asked the reporter to leave his wife and said it was in love with him. Microsoft has completely neutered this tool and it's not all that useful right now. So it will get better, but just that's what that is. On one of these other calls, I think I showed you this thing called the Social Media Maker Machine. So this is a little mini application that I put together that I think could potentially become a way for us to quickly prototype tools that we might want to use. So what this tool was, this is just a Google form right here. And it asks you for your email, because that's where it's going to send the content to. It asks you for a topic. So we might talk about how is AI going to change the future of work? It asks you why the topic is important. What's the problem that needs to be solved? What is your solution? And what is or will be the results of that thing? So this is basically just a simple thought leadership kind of Mad Lib set of questions. What this tool then does is sends your answers to a series of queries to OpenAI, and then it emails you back in about 30 seconds a blog post about your topic with a title and hashtags. It sends you back a little hashtag cloud. It sends you back a series of tweets, right? So this is actually taking a raw concept and turning it into content. So when I was thinking about the proposal thing, one of the things we could do is we could say, okay, here's all the content evolution member companies, and we're going to put those in some searchable form. The first query we could do to OpenAI is, based on this problem I'm trying to solve for a client, who are the companies within here that I would want to be a part of this? And then once we get the summaries of what those companies do, we could, say, okay, how would these companies solve this problem for the client, right? Now, the content that we get back from that will likely not be final content, but it'll probably be 70% of what we want. It'll at least give us a starting point. And I think we could get to an automated vision of that pretty quickly, right? Where step one is which company should be involved. Step two is, how do I talk about these companies for this particular proposal? I've since figured out a way to not only get back content, but also get back content with HTML formatting in it. So you can actually automatically generate, formatted content in different languages. Like here's a Japanese translation of a YouTube description that was automatically generated from another tool that we're prototyping right now. Okay, so those are the tools we're going to use. Any questions or thoughts so far? Okay.
Good so far.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
I guess what's really interesting to me is this is in the context of how content evolution can attract more clients, but I also see that many of these tools could have practical applications in terms of supporting our clients better.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was really excited about that element of it.
Absolutely. And I think the thing that I want, especially for anyone who hasn't used this, the thing I want to get, I want you to get most excited about is once you sort of crack the nut of what you can ask these tools for, for me, what it does is I don't know, it just opened up this whole world of, oh, I could ask it for that. I could ask it for that. In an odd kind of way, it reduced the burden of trying to figure out how I would solve a problem. Like when someone gives me a problem, I go into, my 57-year-old brain and I'm like, okay, step one would be I'd go research it, and then I'd do this. Oh, I've seen that before. And right, I do all these sort of machinations. And what I'm finding now is that I can kind of let go of that and go, oh, let me just start with these tools and let me give it some queries and see what I get back. And then it spawns all sorts of new ideas, and it puts me in a completely different place. Like I don't end up in that sort of writer's block freeze of, the sort of 2 or 3 hours or the 2 or 3 weeks that you need to kind of process something before you actually get started. And then once you're started, you're fine. Like I find that gets collapsed to almost zero. So that's the thing I want to share. I think what I want to do, because there's a couple of folks that are relatively new to actually using this. I did this for a presentation, a workshop I'm doing right after this call. I want to just really quickly go through the 2 slides. So when we talk about this AI stuff, it's coming very fast. And I want to give you a little bit of historical background. So in 2017, Google wrote a paper about this thing called transformers. So AI up to this point, and Richard, you can keep me honest here. AI up to this point, it was very expensive to train. Google comes up with this thing called transformers. And effectively what this does is it makes it much easier to ingest large data sets into these tools. Lots of things happen. GPT-1 is created by OpenAI and GPT-2. In 2020, they released GPT-3, which was the first of these models that really started to give results that were scarily good, right? Those transformers also led to kind of the 2022 thing where you heard about tools like Midjourney and Stable Diffusion that make these really interesting images. I started playing around with these tools. I then figured out with Stable Diffusion, I could upload pictures of myself and it would learn who I am, and then I could make these sort of crazy self-portraits of myself. That was shortly before that app Lensa came out, where everyone uploaded their pictures to this app. And then I don't know if you saw on Facebook, everyone putting up their AI avatars. So all of the stuff that we're seeing, recently that's got everyone excited is all based on this Transformers thing that Google came out with in 2017. Now, November of 2022, this is super new stuff. OpenAI launches ChatGPT. Now, ChatGPT itself is a very stupid, simple app that OpenAI, in their documentation, told people how to build for about a year before they actually built it. They assumed someone would build this because they told them how to, and no one built it. So in the beginning of November, Sam Altman said, someone go build ChatGPT. I think they built it in 2 weeks and launched it. They did not expect it to go anywhere. To get to 100 million users, it took the World Wide Web 8 years to get to 100 million users. It took the iPhone 3.5 years. A lot of people are calling ChatGPT the iPhone moment for AI. It took ChatGPT 2 months to get to 100 million users. So the adoption is crazy. What is this thing? So ChatGPT it's like a Google search bar, right? And like one of the questions you could ask it is, what's so special about ChatGPT? It just looks like this simple little thing. But you can also ask that question in a very specific way. Let me see it in an M&M wrap, and it will write you why it's so cool in an M&M wrap. So I think one of the reasons that ChatGPT took off so much is that with very little input, you can get these kind of magical outputs. They're, parlor tricks, right? And so we saw a lot of people playing around with parlor tricks, and there was a lot of there was a lot of social media buzz about it could do all these crazy things, but it's way more than parlor tricks. And so I just want to give you why, for me, why all of a sudden this feels game-changing to me. So you can do things like say, hey, give me a social media marketing plan, and it will. And you can do things like, you can tell it to act like an expert social media expert, who understands SEO. You can tell it to act like certain personas, and it will answer you differently. And you can get into a back and forth and say, oh, that's a boring traditional marketing plan, and that relies way too much on paid media. I want to know about earned media. Well, then you start to realize, oh, wait, this thing could probably give me the advantages of paid media versus earned media. Oh, and by the way, it can actually do that in a table. So, hey, ChatGPT, build me a table that compares paid media to earned media. And it does that in 30 seconds. Yeah. Mike McGuire's like, oh my God, right? This is what you did for 30 years, right? And 30 seconds, bang. Then you can say, hey, it wrote me this really good email, but I want to put that email into an automation, and I want the email to look pretty. So I need to actually format that email in HTML. Oh, rather than me having to figure out how to do HTML after 30 years of not doing it, I could just say, hey, ChatGPT, could you make me that email pretty in HTML? And yes, it will. It will write you the code for that. In fact, this is the code for the email that I showed you earlier for the social media maker machine. And then it can also do things like, this is something I'm working on for some client things right now. Have Amina tell her story. Well, who's Amina? Well, Amina is a persona that I had ChatGPT create. I figured out what I wanted the persona to be. I wanted it to have an educational background, family background, life events, health events. Once I figured out what that persona was, I said, hey, ChatGPT, give me 12 personas of these kind of people, and it did. Then I went to Midjourney and I created photorealistic images of those people. And then I had Amina, in this case, answer a series of prompts for Storyvine and tell us her story. And I can actually show you, I kept going with this. I actually have a video of Amina telling her story in a Storyvine template. So the reason I wanted to put this out here is that the thing I want to shatter for you is that ChatGPT and these tools are just kind of like a fancy Google search form. This is way more than a Google search form, right? This is functional work. Now, I know when I talked to Mike earlier, I know one of the things that potentially comes up here is, oh, well, these tools hallucinate and they give you bad information and they make stuff up. Yes, they do. So if you're doing something for a client that requires accuracy, tread lightly with this, but you could still use these tools to maybe give you the framework of the work that you're going to put in there. But if you're doing something like creative work or code, which you can figure out if code works or not, then you can start to use these tools in a bit more ambitious way. But understand that what they can do is quite expansive. And again, the technology lying underneath this is a few years old, but ChatGPT in particular is a few months old and is very, very limited. So what these things are going to be capable of moving forward is going to be quite remarkable. Okay, so thoughts, questions, any faces melting, eyes opening?
I've got a question. What inputs did you have to give to come up with this persona?
Hold. I think I've actually got them. That's the other thing about this. The inputs you put into these tools are remarkably simple. They're remarkably simple for what you get out. Let's see, personas. And if you want, I can show you the video that I made.
You should do that, Richard.
Okay.
I mean, Kyle, because it's for people who've seen deep fakes,
Yeah.
this is a pretty good, not trying to imitate, but to generate a.
Yeah, this actually solves a problem. The problem it solves is our clients a lot of times have tough times finding patients to tell their stories. So the question that so what I did was to get to the persona, I said to ChatGPT, I think it was late at night, so I couldn't call Kevin. I know Kevin could have just riffed this off the top of his head. So I said, how do you create a persona? Like, what are the attributes when you're creating a persona? And it gave me like 10 attributes. And then I said, no, give me more, give me 20 attributes of a persona. And then I said, what are the top 7 attributes of a persona? And it gave me some. And then so I picked 4 or 5 of the top ones it gave me. And then I added in the health background, and I added in, I think that was the only thing I added in. And then I basically said, okay, using these 7 attributes, write me 12 personas, you know, of people that follow that framework. And it just generated them like that.
What was the framework, though, that you gave it?
I literally said, write me a persona that incorporates the following attributes, you know, name, age, ethnicity, educational background, family background. So I described out what the attributes of the framework I were. And in fact, I didn't do that. So wait, so hang on, let me show you something. Let's do it real time. So
did you have to like say, I need somebody with a medical condition of X, or no?
Yeah. In that case,
that's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah. So let me show you another concept with ChatGPT. So ChatGPT has memory. So I can say, give me a framework for creating a persona. And I'm purposefully misspelling that. And framework is spelled wrong. No, a person is not. So it didn't understand persona. No, let's see. No, a framework for a persona. Stop generating. So I apologize for misunderstanding your question from earlier. Defines the person's goals. What motivates them, what's their value, what's their beliefs, what are their demographics. So it's giving me this framework. So now I could say, okay, use this framework to create a persona of a middle-aged person recently diagnosed with MLS. I'm going to stop generating there. Hit return. Sure, here's an example of a persona of a middle-aged person diagnosed. Let's see, the person's primary goal. I'm going to stop it. I'm going to say, no, I mean, actually, use the framework to give the person a name and specific attributes of the persona. We'll see how that does. Absolutely. Here's an example. So whether or not this does it or not, her name's Sarah, her age is 45, right? So it is understanding in context of the things I've said before, what I'm asking it for in the present. So one of the biggest shifts that I've had to do with these tools is to not, it's insane, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's not, I almost think of it like this. ChatGPT becomes like an incredibly well-educated assistant or creative collaborator, where I can just sort of chuck stuff at it and it comes back. And whether or not it ends up being, accurate or not, like it gives me enough now. Like once you understand that it can start to do this stuff, you can say, no, you got it wrong. Like I did before. No, I don't want, a theory of a persona. I actually want you to create a person. And so now here's Sarah, right? Sarah's now been created. So I can go edit that. I can also refine that. I can tell it to give me 10 personas, but put them in a table. It'll do that. Let me show you. I'll show you the where I took this thing. So I created the personas, created that picture. I had Amina answer Storyvine prompts, which, in the Storyvine, the way it works, you would download the app and you would record yourself answering these prompts. and that will generate video segments that the Storyvine system then assembles into a video. So we're kind of doing it backwards here. We have Amina answer the questions in text, and then I went to a tool where I took that image that was created in Midjourney, and I took her answers to the specific questions, and I created individual video segments that were her image synthesized. I then took those video segments, uploaded them into the Storyvine platform, and then it automagically edited this video.
Hello, I'm Amina Ahmed. I was diagnosed with ALS about 4 years ago. What brings me joy is spending time with my family, especially my parents and siblings. We enjoy cooking and eating traditional South Asian dishes together. Moving beyond my diagnosis was not easy, but I found comfort in my faith and my family's support. I also started to focus on what I could still do, instead of what I couldn't do anymore. I started to live in the moment and enjoy each day as it comes. This mindset has helped me to embrace my now and make the most of each day. If I could go back in time, I would tell myself to not be afraid to ask for help and to reach out to support groups for individuals with ALS. It's important to surround yourself with positive people who understand what you're going through. I would also encourage myself to educate myself on all of the treatment options available and to be proactive in my care. I hope that by sharing my story, I can inspire and encourage others who are facing similar challenges. I want to show that it is possible to live a fulfilling life with ALS and to not let the diagnosis define you. I would encourage others to share their story because it can provide comfort, hope, and a sense of community to those who are facing similar challenges.
Right? So just astounding. Now, is that ready for prime time? No, it's not. You can still, tell that it's synthesized, but that wasn't possible 6 months ago. Well, it was possible 6 months ago. Richard, this was possible, 30 years ago, but you had to have James Cameron, to be able to put it together. That was literally copying, pasting the pictures and some text into a tool and hitting make her talk. And it was generated within a minute or so. And then I threw it into Storyvine. We could potentially take a patient who can't talk anymore, and maybe we've got a 30-second recording of them. We could simulate them and kind of synthesize them. We could take a real patient who doesn't want to be on camera and maybe make a cartoon character rather than a photorealistic one. So even though this is still kind of raw and creepy and weird right now, it's pretty close. And within a year, that's going to be real. So, and the other background to this, just in terms of the sort of profundity of these tools, Storyvine was created for authentic human beings to tell their stories. Like I've always deeply believed in that the authenticity is the thing. But what I'm realizing with these tools is that there's certain use cases where it actually, if you only have a text story of someone and you can bring that to life with video in this way, and these tools start to get more emotionally realistic and more visually realistic, what's the problem? Like it's opened my eyes to things that are possible that weren't there before. So enough on that. I'm happy to answer any questions, and then we can jump in and do some more stuff.
Is this, Kyle, with that, with the video you described, that just so I'm clear, you're refining as it's going, and then you create the video. Is the deliverable from that then editable separately in another platform, or do I have to continue to refine it within the tool, the chat tool, the GPT chat?
Yeah, well, I mean, so
does that question make any sense? I just because I'm looking at that. I'm looking at that output there of the profile, the text, then the video.
Yeah. Here,
and it's like, oh, wait a minute, that's your tool. That's Storyvine.
No. So hang on. d-id.com. So this is the tool that I created the video in. It's called DID. Let me see, create video. Did I log in? Oh, I'm a guest. Hang on. Log in, sign up. Okay, here we go. So there's my video library. So each of these little segments
Moving beyond my diagnosis was not easy.
was created with text. So what I did with this, so if I say create video, so I uploaded some images. Like this was an image that I did from an art project that I'm working on. So I can hop over to here. Let's see. Hi, my name's Amina. And then I can paste the text in here. I can pick a character. So we're going to have Brandon say this, and then I can say generate video. So it's 17 seconds long, and it's going to generate the video. So it's a very rudimentary tool right now, but so long as I know that the text that I want in there is correct, and so long as I know this is the right character, right, then I can create something that's perfect. And now this is created, so I'll play this.
Hello, I'm Amina. I was diagnosed with ALS about 4 years ago.
Yeah, this is
what brings me joy is spending time with.
And I mean, what's mind melting about this is like, this is like version 1 of this. It's not doing sort of, I know that there are tools out there right now where I can determine sort of, do I want this person happy in this segment or sad in this segment or angry in this segment? So you're going to be able to do sort of emotional choices as well. And then at some point, someone's going to make a tool where you'll upload the whole story of Amina's script, and it will analyze, where should she be sad? Where should she be angry? Where should she be happy? And it will dynamically shift, the emotional output of that character, right? And then also the animations are a little wonky here, like if you look at my
family, especially my parents and siblings.
Like his eyes blink, but they're a machine, so they shouldn't blink. So all of that stuff is going to get more sophisticated. But like we're at the stage right now where you can get something that is relatively realistic in 30 seconds with just a piece of text that you can generate from ChatGPT.
Kyle, fascinating to be able to morph the faces as you talk. So it would start out as a South Asian to the punk rock to this and that, and everything just gradually goes from one to another through a morphing, and that would be so emotionally valuable or impactful to say this isn't one stereotype, it's just a human.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so all of that stuff becomes possible, and again, I feel like in the past 2 months, I feel bad for Kevin and Monique because they've just been hearing me talk about this stuff incessantly for months. But I feel like I am, an evangelical for this stuff because it's very easy to dismiss this technology right now. It's very easy to demonize this technology right now. And it's very easy to look at it and go, oh, it's not perfect. But what's hard to sort of encapsulate is once you actually start using these tools in this sort of collaborative back and forth way, it's just hard to understand or overstate how powerful it is. Okay. Any other questions? I'm happy to sort of take this wherever we want to take it.
Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
I was just saying, are there any direct implications, Kyle, for that type of character generation in terms of, what you imagine content evolution could do with that, right, collectively?
Well,
is there a spokesperson that could be on the website?
Well, I mean, there could be that, but I'll tell you, this goes back to delivering something for the clients. Let's say you do a big research project where you want to get voice of employees, like what are the employees feeling. You do all these qualitative or quantitative surveys and what people are saying. You could use ChatGPT, or you could use GPT, not ChatGPT, but you could use the API to analyze all of the responses of all of the people and say, okay, characterize, what did people say? Give me the 5 big insights. give me quotes that people said that represent each of those insights. Then you could take those and create personas and bring those people to life. Like one is you could go back to the people and you could film them, but that would take a long time. So you could very quickly put together a tool that would analyze some quantitative research, pull insights out of it, turn that into qualitative storytelling, throw that into personas, and then present back to the client. Here's people that are not real. You can tell, you know, you don't have to fake like it's real. You could say, these are just personas, but these personas are going to tell you what's going on in your company. I would argue that that would give you a radically different impact than here's your chart and graph of what the employees said.
Okay, good.
So yeah, I think absolutely. There was another question.
Is that Kevin, Kyle, that following Kevin's question and your response, that could also be, there could be refinements, right? Or in other words, not refinements, done properly, a client could then get that information with the personas and then do what ifs against it, correct? Yeah. We would have the answer, and then just in the same conversation or exchange, client could say, well, okay, that sounds good, but I actually need Northeast to go, you know, I'm not as concerned about increasing penetration in the Northeast. So we don't need to weight that. I need to emphasize Southeast. How would we do that? Or assuming it has that, we have that information.
Yeah, what you're pointing to is a thing that I think is the one of the most powerful things of this. And it's taken me a while to get my head around it. Normally, if I think about how I would answer that question for you, I'd think, well, you know, we could do some analysis of the data, and then we could write a set of logic that says, go into the data and find the specific things that you're looking for, right? As opposed to this new AI model, you could literally just in English say, no, I don't want insights for the Northeast. I want them for the Southwest. And I want you only to focus on impact of efficiency programs. And it just goes and finds that in the data. Now, whether or not it's hallucinating right now, that's still an issue. So that you would have to go back and sort of check against the data. But the tools are already getting to the point where I can show you another tool where it will do an analysis of a long document, answer your questions, and then give you links to where it pulled that answer from. So you can actually, it'll give you hyperlinks to go check against the actual data. Okay, so I'm hoping, has everyone gone to ChatGPT, and have you been playing while I've been talking and rambling?
Yes.
On? Okay,
yes.
good. And any insights? I'm curious what anyone's done.
Positively, well, you know this a bit about me, Kyle. I'm a frustrated musician, but I literally had, I go to certain chestnuts, right? Write me a song about racism, have Bob Dylan write a song about racism. Yeah. Well, Bob's never real specific, right? In a lot of his lyrics, it's pretty evocative, but I'm sitting here looking at this going, part of Bob always describes his best songs as being more like they just come, right? Wherever he is, whatever he is, they just kind of like, I vomit them out, was his quote. I believe that to a certain degree, but I've also seen actually they're in a place in Oklahoma, some of them are scanned online, how he revises drafts. I'm looking at this and it gave me everything, not just a verse and a chorus. It gave me 4 verses, 1 bridge, which is a very typical Bob structure, and then chorus, outro, literally labeled like that. And the lyrics are like a little too on point.
Yep. Yeah. And
Bob, but I could see that's how Bob would be going back and going, okay, no, I wouldn't say it like that. But that's kind of shocking when you realize how long it takes to just write a 3-minute song.
Exactly. Yeah. And you can go back and tell it, hey, that's not, those are a little too on point, make them more obtuse. You use more metaphors and similes, right? You can also tell it to give you the chords of the song. It'll write the chords of the song. It's amazing. Anyone else? Who else has played and seen anything fun and interesting that surprised them?
Yeah, Kyle, I've been watching AI for 50 years in healthcare and medicine, and I've always been a cynic. And seeing what generative technology can do has completely flipped me into not quite an evangelist as you are, but it's definitely a game changer.
Yeah.
And looking at the healthcare, particularly in my world, I always was working at a meta level. I used metadata, and I was working at a higher level of abstraction, and then each piece was an instance of that.
Yep.
And I think what we're looking at here is the GPT is a higher level of abstraction. You know, we're used to being the most holy or more meta than thou, and we're meeting a tool that's more meta than us. And it's up there. It could be doing this in Swahili and Arabic and who knows how, could write it in Python or COBOL. Yep. And it has a meta level understanding or connections, and it's purely a connectionist model. There's just all these connections that it's found, and it's able to reach up and build up models at that level that we can't understand. We can probe it and we can prompt it, but we can't understand exactly the grammar of how it's going from Portuguese to English or whatever.
Yep.
And I think that's really what's so amazing is we're just not used to seeing a more meta machine than us. And it's scary, but it's also incredibly intriguing.
Yeah. I mean, that's it for me. You know, Storyvine's a 10.5-year-old company. We're going to be 11 in May, Monique. Jesus, Monique and I have been working together.
I know, it's terrifying, isn't it? I feel so old.
But it's like, we have never effectively done a pivot. We've been profitable since 2017. Like I've never really rethought what Storyvine is, because I've never had to. It did what it did well. And all of a sudden with these tools and what they make possible, I've completely rethought what it is, what it outputs, what the inputs are, what its value is. And so I guess in the spirit of you know, this conversation, I think a place to start for you, for your individual businesses, is just take what you do now and start to do it with these tools. Like start to actually just execute the work you do on a day-to-day basis with a collaborative partner in this tool, right? As ridiculous as that sounds, just start doing it. And I think what you'll find is there are certain parts of your business that are just ridiculously inefficient that actually take you away from being able to think critically and deliver value. So one of the ways that I've been thinking about these tools is, what could your job be, or your role be, or your company? What's that?
There might have been a stray off mic.
What could you be, you, the company, if all of the mundane and repetitive work that you do were fully automated? What's left? What's left is critical thinking, you know, connection with human beings, empathy, right? Like I almost feel like these tools are going to allow us to sort of offload the repetitive, non-thinking work and just sort of live in that higher plane, where you can really interact with clients, really try to solve their problems, really, you know, think about solving them at a higher level, because that lower level stuff is no longer in the way, right? You no longer have the 2 days of cranking out the proposal.
Yeah, you're almost at, you know, a Boston Consulting Group core competency analysis on steroids.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Is that, you know, it forces you to say, what are the core things that I actually want to be spending my time and attention on versus the things that I can move away, all right, either, you know, tool sets or other, you know, platform like capabilities, all right, it gives you that rethink. Now, Kyle, let me ask you this question. You said, well, it caused me to rethink Storyvine, and we'll ask the same question about content evolution in a second, but what's the insight about, you know, the patented video capture and you know, system? What is the actual pivot for you now that you have this tool set available for you?
Okay, So I'll quickly show you the slide. I'm not going to go through the slide because it's just insufferable. This is the most complicated slide I've ever built. It's got 45 builds in it. Storyvine is where it was historically was it interviews a person to then turn that interview into a video. And so it's ostensibly what you were buying was authenticity, auto magic editing, right? It will automatically do this, and the ability to scale video storytelling. The auto magic part of Storyvine just got completely irrelevant because in the next 6 months, we're going to see video tools that out-edit Storyvine by such a dramatic margin that our stuff's going to look stupid. Like it's just going to look primitive. So one of our core value propositions is I'm considering it 100% devalued, even though no one knows that yet, and those tools don't exist. But auto magic creation of anything, that's now a commodity. What remains? Authenticity, I think, is huge. I think in a world where you're producing tons and tons of content, authenticity will rise above the noise. So I think authenticity is huge. Then so Storyvine has always been about data-rich content capturing, but it's been not data-rich on the output. The output is just, here's your video. So we talked about you, because you captured things in a modular way, these orange squares here, we capture a story in this modular way. We talked conceptually about you could take those modules and you could turn them into other content. Now I'm looking at this and I'm like, because I've got automatic AI-powered transcriptions in the system now, I can take that transcription and I can generate, YouTube descriptions from that. I can translate them into 120 languages. I can grab pull quotes from the video and turn those into Instagram posts. I can create tweets that are based on what this woman talked about in her video. I can even write a blog post that's well written in an interview style of a Pulitzer Prize winning writer of her story. And all of that's generated, automatically within minutes. So I'm looking at Storyvine now as an IP leveraged platform where every story that I get in can now be leveraged in remarkable, ways. So it's like, and even how we ingest them. I can now ingest existing content. I could give a traditional production team a shot list and ingest that. And once it's in here, it can generate all this output. I can take legacy unedited 4 hours of patient interview video and pull out the segments I need for a Storyvine thing. So it's just made me rethink the entire extent of what the platform is. I'm sorry for going on.
No, I got that.
I'm right in the middle of it. So
I think so what I want to do is Kyle's kind of raised his hand and said, all right, so we can do that kind of rethink for our federation, right? And we can do the from to version. I'm just going to open up, right? You don't have to, you can put it in chat or you can, write to me, but if you want to be part of that, let me know, because we're forming a small team as, it's kind of the kickoff to doing a transformation using these transformation engines, all right, for the Federation itself and how it works and how it delivers value. So if you want to be part of that, let us know.
Kevin,
go ahead.
Can I make?
Yes, Andrea, go ahead.
Yeah. So this has opened up a lot of thoughts, but before I left Pitney Bowes, I had the opportunity to present to their board on AI and how a corporation like Pitney Bowes, what were the implications to them and how I was going to take the analytics function and marketing to the next generation. And one of the tools was a tool called ThoughtSpot that we started investing in. And what it was is an analytic tool that let you use natural language to, instead of having a data scientist ask the questions, you could have a normal person sit there on a Google line and, ask, analyze this, analyze that. And, when you looked at it at a macro level, it had significant implications for the future of staffing, for the future of how the data is formulated, for the future of communication. So in addition to the actual changing the work, like Kyle demonstrated, there could be a consultative practice associated with content evolution that talks about what are the implications of this organizationally. You talked about future of work. It's not just individual future of work, it's on a more macro level. You know, this changes like everything, because this type of technology, you know, so your analytics function is now going to be totally different, you know, shaped differently. And so I think that if you're going to get folks to get past the fear factor, I think you have to address those things. And one of the implications, because, you know, everybody's like afraid, oh my God, I'm gonna have to fire my whole marketing staff. I'm gonna have to fire this. And what we kind of talked about is, no, it's going to be configured differently. But it's the same way when technological change, you didn't have, you know, people weren't making horse and buggy whips anymore, but there was a whole industry created that now required people to understand how to make automobile chassis. So you have to figure out, what is the new skill set? Where is that going? How does that look? And you know,
I think it's a huge opportunity.
Yeah, I think having a consultative practice around that, because that's gonna be on all these executives' heads after you blow their mind, Kyle, with, you know, it's like,
so that's a subcomponent of the existing action learning workshop that we have that's called Unstoppable Forces. However, Andrea, it is not manifestly a new practice inside of content evolution. So we should discuss that. Because that's up your alley.
That's right up my alley.
Given your background and, you know, your doctoral credentials. So 100%.
And that's some of what I had to do to convince them to make the investment in this tool in Pitney Bowes, was to talk about that, right? So I think that's okay. Enough said.
Okay, so
I'll tell you, I'll piggyback on it, because I think that consulting practice, if it's done in the right way, that team is versed enough in the AI tools that they're not just delivering recommendations, they're potentially delivering prototypes of tools, right? So instead of saying, you know, this is how things are going to change, you say, this is how things are going to change. Oh, and by the way, here's a tool that is kind of a glimpse into the future, like that Amina video, right? Where it's like, that might not be ready for prime time right now, but I did that in about 90 minutes, right? So imagine bolted into this consulting practice is, we want to over deliver on the conclusions we come up with for that client. And we're going to use AI to really amplify what we give back to them, because that's just going to lead to more work.
And my partner in my presentation was the chief technologist and the chief data officer of the company. And the three of us presented this. And you have to have you have to have the real geeky guys who can make it happen. And you have to have the people like me with the organizational knowledge to say, and what are the implications of this for your company?
You know, among the things that occur to me about this are that, you know, this may be far too ambitious on a number of levels, but one could imagine at least us making the case that an effort like a gathering like Content Evolution is a more promising model for all kinds of value creation than a traditional corporation, because it's an assemblage of expertise, and what this all optimizes for is expertise. It's not hands and legs. If you can do what you've described, Kyle, which is program without being a programmer, code without being a coder, then this becomes a kind of, you know, software or management system or whatever version of 3D printing. You know, you can just generate the system and provide that to an entity. I mean, the current entities that we're stuck with are those who have budgets that can hire us for one thing or another. But, you know, it's certainly not impossible to imagine, in effect, generating clients as opposed to finding them. But in any case, I think that, you know, that this does have all kinds of meaning about firing people. I mean, it just absolutely, it simply does.
Yeah.
And you know, you know, liberal Democrat in me, you know, has worries about that, but there's no escaping the implication.
Yeah, one of the original things that we talked about when this was made public is that, you know, Content Evolution is a non-holding company. And what I meant by that was when you look at, say, an Omnicom or a, you know, large, you know, advertising conglomerate.
WPP or something.
Yeah, exactly. That all of those, you know, acquired firms and are weighted down by debt, right? So they have very large, you know, allocations that have to be attached to any assignment because you have to pay those taxes to the parent entity to, you know, pay down the debt. Now, there is no such thing inside of Content Evolution. You have the capabilities of what was acquired, but it's weightless in terms of, you know, business model point of view is there is no debt, right? So there are some potential, you know, positive things that we could leverage about that in this new era. You know, all of that potential energy did not get released because we didn't have the kind of you know, electronic corpus callosum to get our collective brain glued together. This holds the potential to do that. Okay, so I'll stop at that.
Yeah. I think you're onto something really big, Mike. You know, I assume most people on this call have felt the effects of ageism, you know, in your careers, right? Yeah. I deeply believe that this is in a lot of ways an antidote to that. If I think if I think 6 months ago, hey, I want to start up a new project, where my mind immediately went was, where can I get the cheapest programmer and the cheapest illustrator and the cheapest, right? And I'm going to go to Fiverr and I'm going to get these cheap things. As I think about it now, I think, who's been on the planet long enough and has the right expertise? Like, I want Richard Boyd there. If we're talking about how we're going to have, you know, Toyota look at their own internal data and turn this into one of these magic systems, I want Richard there because he's been in that conversation before. Oh, and I want Kevin there for, you know, to be able to talk to the C-suite. Like, I'm thinking about things in a completely different way. So I think that idea of the new primary skill is critical thinking. And then once you can understand how to ask these tools for what you want, then it's all about curation and refinement. So I still think, you know, we may need tactical people for the refinement thing, but the critical thinking, the curation piece, I want people with as much experience as possible to do that. Because all the tactical stuff, let's assume that gets automated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, Kevin, I don't know what the right point is to interject some of the other thoughts that I've been sharing with you, but, you know, just on the business side, when we're thinking, first of all, about how is Content Evolution going to harness these technologies for their clients and how does the offering change, all that sort of thing, or how do we actually advise, like we're talking about with this Unstoppable Forces workshop, the enterprise or government or, you know, other organizations to implement these technologies. There are, like I alluded to in the very beginning, some really deep considerations that have to be thought through. Like, first of all, you know, I think some of you know that Reid Hoffman invested in my last company, and he invested right at the time when he was starting LinkedIn and right after he'd made with Peter Thiel that first investment in Facebook. And I remember checking in on him a couple of years in and asking him, like, hey, so Reid, like, how's it going there at LinkedIn? Are you making money? He goes, no, we're still not making money, but you would not believe how much actionable information we see every day. And that really resonated with me, right? And I watched as when I first met Reed and he invested in my company back then in, I think 2003, he was worth about $30 million. Today he's worth about $10 billion. And a lot of that has to do with that actionable information.
Right.
And the reason I'm saying that is just like I said at the beginning, there's a couple of things to think about. And I'm not gonna, I don't know how much you wanted me to talk today about this stuff, Kevin, but number one, is how much of this stuff should you be sending over your firewall outside to software as a service like this, where, what happens to these prompts? I put a prompt in and I get a response. Where does that response go? Where does the prompt go? And if they're sensing that, just like Reed told me, what does it mean if 3,000 employees at Lockheed Martin are updating their LinkedIn profile today? That is actionable. Is that a sell order? Is it a buy order? It's something that only he is being able to, people inside that company are able to see, but it is actionable, right? And it's useful information and they're watching it, they are. So how do we advise clients on how they bring some of this stuff in-house inside their firewall? And there's a thing called Chat GPT Neo X or something like that, that we're now looking at Tanjo at applying to the people where customers where we've already created a machine learning system. So it's under their control. It's transparent to inquiry. They can somewhat govern at least how the system's trained, on what data it's trained.
OpenAI. Yesterday, OpenAI, I don't know if it was leaked or whatever, but OpenAI has a new product coming out that are basically hosted environments for organizations. So you can basically have your own instance of it.
So that, that's the key, because that's the other consideration is, for those of us who've built business models on top of other companies' systems.
Yeah.
I remember building multiplayer sort of simulation learning games in the early 2000s based on the Flash communication server. And then all of a sudden they stopped supporting it. What happened to all those things I deployed? Well, they weren't future-proof, were they? They don't work anymore. And you got some upset customers. But also just breaks your business model. And we did that with Tanjo. We had a newsreader system we had based on things like Prismatic. I think Jay Sanders is on there. Remember that, Jay? And what happens when those systems go away and all of a sudden you're scrambling for how do I replace it with something that provides that functionality? Those are all just sort of sobering real world sort of considerations for how do you deploy this stuff? How does it fit in the workflow of the organization? It's not enough to say, hey, here's a capability, let's just start using it. What are all the considerations? How does it fit inside of the workflow of the organization, and what problems is it solving, and what new ones is it possibly creating, right? Normally I'm Kyle. I'm like Kyle. I'm just enthusiastically evangelizing all this stuff, and everybody should use it. But now I really am thinking more about, like I said at the beginning, this is different kind of technology. It's very intimate. It's very powerful. It can't be bought and deployed the way some other things we've deployed in the past have.
Yeah.
So we have to think about that.
Yeah.
Well, Richard, and this is both to you and Kyle, is to that issue about the new product from OpenAI about the enterprise or business version. Is it understood that that's going to be, I'm going to be able to take my instance of that and turn it on to all of my internal corporate data and communications? Or is it just a licensing thing that allows me to go out and use it as a business as opposed to turning it on my own data sets?
I mean, that's another implication there, right? It's who's training it and on what, and who's organizing the data, because what we found is everywhere we go, everybody's got big data, but nobody has information, which is data that's been organized or is meta tagged or available so that you can actually turn it into that last. I have this whole slide on, here's big data. There's a big leap from there to information, which is data that's organized. After that is intelligence, which is information that can have some kind of function or process performed on it, so a human can act on it and rely upon it, because it's the data is good and the functions being performed on it are proper. But most people are still stuck at that first step. So
Yeah.
getting open source code is not going to be enough, but that's great. It's a great opportunity for companies like us
I think
and the rest of you to implement.
There's an early indicator that, you know, it's a couple of sectors they've been particularly dependent and requiring more and more content. This is getting to the whole structured data thing, Richard. Many of those who are using kind of the more modern versions of DAM systems have done that, right? They've applied their taxonomies for products and descriptions, et cetera. And to me, that's, you know, would probably, rather than my, you know, all of my financial data, right? Those two might be the earliest data sets that are the most mature. You know what I mean? In terms of just, they've been, a taxonomy has been applied and enforced.
There's a lot of labeled structured data sets now, and that there's a whole market or sub-market in that information. But again, it has to be looked at carefully because there's bias in different data sets. But that's another discipline that we all have to, any of us practitioners in machine learning have to be thoughtful about.
Yeah. And I think, you know, I think that there are going to be tools. I'll show you on here. There's a question about what was the software that provided the links to things. I just did a search in the Bing sidebar, what is content evolution? And it gave me some wrong answer. And then I said, what is the company Content Evolution? And you'll see it gave me an answer here. It was founded by Kevin Clark, global business brand, all around awesome guy. He's the best. You want to hang out with him at a party. You know, it got it all right. But but there's hyperlinks here to, you know, to the site and to different things. I think to this idea of being able to search on your own data. So this is a tool that we may or may not use this tool. So hang on, let me give you a little background of what I'm about to show you. So when you're using OpenAI, it's got a maximum search length of 4,000 tokens, which equals about 3,000 words. So if you have a really long transcript from, say, a meeting, one of the things we've talked about is, you know, could we hop on a meeting like this and then immediately start querying it to pull insights? Right. If it's longer than 3,000 token or 4,000 tokens, 3,000 words, then you actually can't do it. You have to break it up into chunks and it just becomes a real pain in the butt. There's a site out there called humata.ai, where you can upload a PDF. So this is a 51-page text transcript of an AI artist salon meeting that we had. And I just turned it into a PDF and uploaded it to this. And, you know, I can say, what did Richard Boyd talk about in this meeting when he presented? And now it's going to search that 51-point document, and we'll see how close it gets to it. This tool pulls out, you know, some things are accurate, some things are not. But I know Microsoft has announced that part of the Azure cloud platform is going to be the ability to really easily ingest this kind of data. This said, Richard Boyd talked about the need for data scientists to have access to a large amount of data in order to create more accurate and satisfying results. He also discussed the potential of using machine learning to create virtual conversations with historical figures, the need for behavior scientists to consider the ethical implications. He also discussed his experience with AI and computer gaming and the use of AI to autonomously move around environments. Finally, he discussed his investment in Microsoft stock with a critical view of Microsoft. So I don't know if that last part,
right, by the way, since
yeah, but you see here pages 20, 22, and 24, it's actually jumping me to the sections where it has summarized what he talked about into this little sentence. So this is a very rudimentary tool right now. I talked to the co-founder of this yesterday. You know, the plans for this are big. There's a new tech out there called LangChain, where you can basically point it to a bunch of different, you could point it like to your Google Drive and basically make your Google Drive a searchable thing, right? So I think tools are going to come that are going to make it easier and easier and easier to get this unstructured, untagged data into some sort of form where you can search against it. So So, but this tool in particular, so here's where my thinking was for sort of a proof of concept with very little programming, right? If we want to do some programming, we can do that. But if we could use something like the OpenAI Playground to pull in synopses or to pull in, what each of the companies says about what they do from their website, for example, or have everyone send us PDFs. Then we summarize that. Then we dump all those summaries into a single document and dump it into something like Humata, where this big long document is, bios of the people and descriptions of the companies and who their ideal customers are. We just have one big long document with a bunch of unstructured data in it. And then you could come over, here and say, Toyota has approached us and they want to solve this problem and that problem. Who are the best companies within the organization to be able to do that? And at a minimum, it would sort of pull up, areas within the document, that it recommends it. So I think we could quickly get to a proof of concept that starts to point in the direction of something that we could use, and then determine, okay, what tool do we actually want to go build? Because ultimately what you want to do is you want to have this thing be dynamic where, once the URL of a company and all the LinkedIn profiles of the primary players are in this database, this thing is constantly just updating its searchable data set, right? And as we add companies and take companies away, this is a dynamic thing. So I think that's where we want to get. But I think short term, we could have a tool that allows us to search across content evolution companies and people with relative ease and not much cost.
So by the way, Tanjo has a similar system. We used, and again, Jay, I don't know if it was Word2Vec, I think is the technology we use for that. But I'm also, like, going back to my earlier point, I'm interested, like, what is Humata's business model?
Yeah, I don't know that
it's a place where I'm supposed to put my documents and then they distill them in some way, but what's their model? How they make money?
I think ultimately, like I talked to the guy, yeah, what I said to him was, my biggest concern here is I've got pharma clients, right? So I can't be dumping pharma data in here.
Here's my private research.
He's taking this really seriously. Where this breaks down is this stuff gets sent to OpenAI, and OpenAI right now, you can make a request to have your data be treated privately, but they're not responding to anyone. Like I'm on a couple of lists, and like we haven't, like Monique sent a note to them. I've talked to 4 or 5 other people where they're not getting back, right? If they do these standalone instances of OpenAI that you can have a virtual machine, then I think it'll be safer. But I think it's a very big deal. Humata in particular, I assume they're going to a place where they'll charge you for this, right? Like right now, it's just a proof of concept. But I think this will get to a place where you could just point, a directory of PDFs in a Google Drive to this thing and start playing with it. But it's not that difficult to actually go build that tool, right? The things like LangChain make it relatively straightforward to build your own version of this. So I just wanted to share this one because I think for the content evolution proof of concept, it's a tool that, it's fairly low risk to put public information in it and be able to search on it.
So one of the things that occurs is once we have a, capabilities, knowledge base, we could insert, scan and insert, things that are happening in the news every day and say, oh, you know what? Norfolk Southern needs some help on X, right? Because I immediately sent a note to Richard Carson, who has worked on a lot of like the Exxon Valdez and the Deepwater Horizon oil spills. And I said, this is an oil spill on land, right? What should we consider doing, about this, right, as a choice flows team? In any event, we could insert things that we're observing topically and say, do we need to write a letter or ping somebody that we know in our network about, this particular thing that we're observing? right?
Well, you know, another thing that comes to mind, Kevin, is, you know, there's something about just the visibility of the organization. You know, Content Evolution doesn't have a marketing budget. So you could do that same thing, take topical news stories, have it automatically sort of pull in, you know, who are the experts within this organization that might comment on this? Give me a comment, right? So have the system automatically, you know, read the news story, figure out who in the federation should comment on it, generate that comment, and then send that to that person to say, you know, tweak this as you will, but then tweet this out under the Content Evolution, you know, give us the blessing or tweet it out on your own thing. But like, you know, that's the kind of thing where you could use that for business generation, but also for marketing.
Yeah. All right. So bring us home, Kyle. What are the next things that you would like the membership, the federation, to consider doing? We'll be at the top of the hour in 6 minutes.
I think what would be the most efficient to get a proof of concept up and running is without any member participation, we could go to all the member websites and basically grab enough data off their website to throw in a document to make it searchable. But ideally, what we would get from them is, you know, here's the 2 or 3 pager that describes your company. And then here's the 2 or 3 pager of bios of people you want represented in this, right? So, so just having, what is the company? Who are the primary players, right? And their bios. I think if we had that from every company in you know, some sort of you know, reasonable format, then we could pretty quickly put it in a tool like Humata and start to play around with, okay, what does it make possible? Do we need to have it, as Richard was saying, do we need to have it in a more structured way to make it actually useful? Or is that all about prompt engineering, about how we ask it questions? Then we come into a tool like this. So I was talking before about the OpenAI Playground. Couple of things to know here. There's different models. DaVinci 003 is the latest GPT model. These will keep changing. So you can change, different models are better for different things. There's also this thing called temperature. So it defaults to 0.7. 0 is it tries to answer the thing as, you know, as non-creatively, for lack of a better term, as possible. 1, it answers it as creatively as possible. So you can actually dial around with how much it hallucinates. And if you wanted to get really predictable results, you dial that down to 0. There's also sort of maximum length of what it outputs. But what I would imagine is that once we've got a big chunk of data that we can look at across the companies, then it starts to become about, okay, what are the kinds of things we want to get out of it? So Kevin, you had sent me this template for a proposal, right? So, you know, here's the executive overview. During our last conversation, you expressed interest in these. In the offering and description section, you know, it would be nice to be able to say, here's the companies we you know, recommend solve this problem. Here's what each of them is going to contribute, you know, all that sort of stuff. So if we figure out what elements we would want to put into something like this, we could then prompt engineer on OpenAI to generate that. So just really quickly, what I've got here is act as a marketing expert and business consultant as you consider the following company description. And there's, you know, Content Evolution there. And now I can say, you know, write me 2 paragraphs. First explains what content evolution is and who created it. The second describes how they will help Toyota reimagine their future with AI beyond manufacturing. I don't know, whatever, some made up thing. If I hit return here, Content Evolution is a federation of companies. It was created by Kevin Clark, former director of brand and values for IBM. Content Evolution can help Toyota reimagine their future with AI beyond manufacturing, content evolution expertise is in voice of people. So it at least gives you a starting point. So I think if we figured out what are the modular elements we would want to be able to consistently get out of this data set, we can then create prompts that give us those things pretty reliably. And then we could put it into, so this is Zapier. So how I made that social media maker machine, I've got a Google form, so it's taking the input from a Google form, and then it's sending multiple different prompts over to OpenAI. So one of the prompts it sends over is using these variables. That's what was put into the thing. Write a 350-word LinkedIn post. So it's basically just a modular set of prompts that give you outputs that you want, that I can then put in one of these emails, you know, that looks like this. So with that combination of things, start with a data set of who's in here, who are the people, figure out what we want out of it, and then do some prompt engineering. Once you have the prompts dialed in, then you can start to put it into automation tools like this. So I think that's how we would do the prototype. And then from there, we can figure out what's actually of value. So that would be my suggestion. Okay. We have a minute left.
Yeah. Kyle, thank you for your leadership today. Let me thank Richard Boyd for being with us. Another welcome to Mike McGuire as a co-host of Content Evolution's nuWorld calls. We've got more very interesting topics coming up right around the bend. And as I said, if you want to be part of this, all right, as we work on, you know, a prototype for what we have the potential to become, you know, using this technology, you know, to better serve our clients, just raise your hand. Thanks for being with us, and all the best, and in everything you do, be intentional. Cheers.
See you, everybody.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, everyone.
I know.